Greetings and welcome to Meet a CHM Family Member. My name is Cory MacDonald. I am the Engagement Director for the Choroideremia Research Foundation. I would like to thank our sponsors before I introduce our guests, Biogen, Santen, and Spark Therapeutics, who provide the funding so that we can do these things. And today it's Meet CHM Family Members, as in plural. I have two brothers with me today, both good friends, CHMers, originally from Texas, although they're not both in Texas anymore. But I would like to introduce Ron and Danny Downs. Hi, guys. Thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you.
This is going to be a fun one. I can already. Now, I know y'all are originally from Texas. Now, whereabouts in Texas did you grow up?
Texas Panhandle, a town called Borger. Most people are familiar with the city of Amarillo in the Texas Panhandle. And Borger is about 50 miles northeast of Amarillo, there in the Panhandle.
Okay. So you were way up in Texas.
Yeah, its source of industry. Back in 1926, oil was discovered there with two oil wells there in the Panhandle. And Borger was founded at that time. And now Ronnie can tell you a lot about this. Our dad worked there, and Ron did too. There's a Phillips Petroleum Company refinery there in Borger. That's the main source of industry there in Borger.
Fantastic. Yeah, Texas is a nice state. I've been there enough times now to know. So now, where are you living currently? Should I go by age or who's better looking, or is that the same thing?
Oh, both of those are Ron, so go ahead.
So where are you currently residing, Ron?
Well, I'm glad Danny admitted that.
I was just deferring.
I currently live in the southwest part of Kansas in a smaller town called Ulysses.
Nice. And Danny, where are you at?
I live in southeast Texas in a city called Beaumont. It's tucked into it's on Interstate 10, about an hour and 15 minutes east of Houston and about 30 miles west of the Louisiana state line.
Okay, I was going to say, yeah, you must be really close to Louisiana.
Yeah, about 30 miles away.
I was down in your area last year prior to COVID hitting. My wife and I went on vacation to Galveston for a week.
Yeah, so Galveston's about an hour and 30 minutes west of here.
Yeah, that was a nice trip.
Yeah.
So now both of you are CHMers. Now, when were you all diagnosed at the same time, or was one diagnosed first and then they tested everybody else, or how did that work out in your family?
Well, Danny actually was misdiagnosed to begin with. I was diagnosed at about age 40. I'm now 74, so about age 40, I had begun to notice some problems with my vision, and just for a routine optometrist visit for new glasses, he asked me if I'm having any new symptoms or anything, and I told him I was having a lot of trouble with night vision, and he said, well, let me look. And he looked for a long time and just kept looking. And I said, are you finding something? So he leaned back and he said, I'm finding a disease that I've never seen before. You have a retinal disease of some kind, and I'm going to refer you to a retina specialist in Dallas that I would highly recommend. And so I went to see him a week or two later, and he diagnosed me as choroideremia. Danny had already started symptoms, but he was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. And I told him that the doctor said that was highly unlikely for us to have two different diseases. And I'll let Danny pick it up from his side now.
Yeah, when I was in like March of 1985, I noticed I had a problem with my central vision in my left eye. I had a slit, a blockage from like, I would say the northeast to the southwest. That's the best way to describe it. And I went to see an optometrist, and of course he got really excited when he saw that. He referred me to ophthalmologist here clinic here in Beaumont. And I went over there, and they diagnosed me as being with retinitis pigmentosa. Now, when Ron was diagnosed with choroideremia, I had a different ophthalmologist at that time, and I asked him, I said, is it possible that he has one disease and I have a different disease? He said, it's not likely. He said, Danny, you probably have choroideremia also. And then Ron found out about the years, I think it was years later, he found about the blood test where they could check for the absence of the gene in your blood. And so Ron told me about that. I think he had gone to a choroideremia conference in New Orleans. And he told me about that test. I told my doctor about the test, and he drew the blood and sent it off. And he contacted me and said, yeah, Danny, he said, you definitely have choroideremia. That was in, I think, 2006.
Yeah, I remember the conference was 2004 was in New Orleans conference. So probably, yeah.
It might have been the,
yeah. Yep, that was Dr. MacDonald's original blood test before they had genetic screening. So we're going into the Wayback Machine there.
mm-hmm.
Now, have you noticed, and I'm sure the both of you have traded, kind of notes on where your site is at ages and levels. Now, have you noticed that there was a difference in your progression rates?
In my case, I started deteriorating probably about 16 or 17 years ago, and then it very rapidly began to fail, and now maybe about 5 years ago, I could no longer see much of anything useful on a computer screen, and could not see a book to read. Before that, I was an avid reader and could read newsprint just fine, with my central vision. But then when it started failing, it seemed like in about 6 or 7 years, and I have very little sight left now.
And then how about you, Danny?
Yeah, I was able to work until 1997. I was an agent with the Prudential Insurance Company. I've been with them for a little bit over 20 years, and it just got to where I could no longer, I had to fill out insurance applications, whether car insurance, house insurance, life insurance, whatever. It got difficult for me to fill out the applications. And so I went on long-term disability with Prudential at that time. And then I think I could still read. I was still wearing glasses at that time, but my ability to read, I don't think I've been able to read since about 2000, 20, 21 years ago. I've not been able to read. And I have no usable, I'm not blind, but to be able to see with anyone's face with detail, or to be able to read or anything like that, I haven't been able to do that in years.
Yeah, that's kind of like my worst eye. If I close my left eye and just rely on my right, that's pretty much what that one is down to at this point, where I can see shapes and colors, that kind of thing, but zero detail.
I think Ron can see, we talk about this, and I think he's probably going to differ with me on this, but I think Ron can see some, I'm not saying a great deal, but somewhat better than I can. When we were in Dallas in 20, what was it, 16, 17?
18.
18 in the Dallas conference, I've
Mhm.
begun noticing a phenomenon in my eyes, and they talked about it there, and it's the screen door effect. I think they call that ptosia. I'm not sure if that's the correct term for it, but it's like when you look, when I look at something, it's like I'm looking through a screen door. I have they're not always, there's time when they're more noticeable than they are others, but I have the vertical and the horizontal lines. And also I have, when I look at, like I'm looking at the TV screen right now, I can see the screen is on, but it's like it's snowy.
Mhm.
So that's been the thing that has affected my vision the most in the last 3 years, and it's progressing, and that's the thing that has affected me the most. But I want to say this for all of the people that are watching this video: if you have choroideremia, I'm not down, I'm not negative. I've accepted this. Uh, Years ago, I became a Christian, and God's been in charge of my life ever since then. And He had a reason for me to have this disease. I know why. I'm not going to go into any detail about that, but there are things that I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I didn't have choroideremia, and I mean that in a positive way. God has used this to affect changes in me positively that would have been difficult otherwise. So I'm happy with it. I wish I didn't have it, but God allowed me to have it. I've got I've got a wife that we've been married a year from December will be our 50th wedding anniversary,
Oh,
and
nice.
she has taken care of me. She watches out for me. She makes sure that I she does for me whatever she can. I have a church family that the kids anywhere from 5 or 6 years old all the way up to teenagers, they almost have a contest every time I'm there to see who's going to help Brother Danny around the church building. And also, one other thing I want to say is I am the music director at my church.
Awesome.
I lead the music and I lead hymns. Now, I cannot see to read the print in a hymnal. I haven't been able to do that for years. And somebody say, well, how do you do that? Because you got to lead those hymns. Well, one of the things that God has given me, I guess, in replacement for my vision, and Ron will talk to you about this, that He's given me a memory to remember the uh, lyrics to the hymns. In fact, my wife tells me, she said, I don't know how you remember all that stuff, not just the hymns. She says, you have so much useless information wandering around in your head. She said, I don't know how you keep up with all that stuff.
That might be a general CHM thing because I hear the same thing from my wife.
Sometimes I'll ask her, do you realize what today is? She'll go, I have no idea. And I probably really don't even care. So, but I'll just go ahead and tell her, well, like July the 9th was the 5th anniversary of us moving into the house that we're in right now. So
Mhm.
I asked her that the other day. She said, I don't know. But I've got all that useless information. Anyway, I'm very upbeat about my lifestyle, and I'm happy. So if you have choroideremia, don't think that your life is over. It's not over.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
Amen.
Well, let's backtrack. So you touched a little bit, Danny, on what your career was. Now, Ron, now what did you do for career or careers, fun jobs that you had, or what have you done now?
I started out in my career, and I guess you'd call it, would be I am an ordained minister. I'm a Baptist preacher, and I pastored churches and lived in several parts of the country and pastored churches. But then in about 1980, um, my my first wife, decided she didn't want to be married to me anymore, and so she divorced me, and and so I have not pastored a church since then. I've been interim a few times, but I have not pastored a church since then. And I went to work for an oil refinery, Phillips Petroleum, excuse me, working for that oil refinery at Borger, Texas. Sorry, I'm
No
gonna have to
problem.
get a glass of water. And so I had about 25 years working in the refinery, and then my vision began failing, and so after about that many years, um, the company decided to put me on um, a disability,
Mhm.
and so I was disabled for uh, several years, and till I uh, wound up severing from the company and retiring from them, and that sort of thing. So I had about probably close to 20 years in the ministry, and then about 20 years at that oil refinery. And so I've been retired,
For a couple of years.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, although Ron, it's been many years since you pastored a church, you've always done a fantastic job leading the non-denominational service that we have at our conferences every year, and I hope you can continue to do that.
I really enjoy doing that too.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody loves our Ron. So, we've gotten a little bit into this, but I'm gonna go into the well, actually, obviously, both of you gentlemen being just a couple of years older than me, we won't go into that, but hobbies. What kind of things do you do now for, to keep yourself occupied, keep yourself having some fun? What kind of hobbies do you get into nowadays?
What occupies my time now is, of course, I read my Bible a lot. I have an app on my phone where my phone can read it to me. I've got a particular app that reads it to me. So I read on my Bible for anywhere from 1 to 2 hours a day, and maybe a little bit of study, thinking, and sermon preparation. I don't actively preach at the church we're in, but I'm usually the one that does the fill in time, and so I get to do that from time to time. But whenever I have time that I'm really ready to relax, I listen to books, and I got introduced to I think every state in the union has got a a way for blind people to listen to books. And
Mhm.
so there is a website called BARD, BARD, and I suppose that stands for something, but I don't know what it is. And anyway, they actually gave me the the um, the player, and then um, I'm not proficient enough at my computer. My wife downloads books for me. She'll download, anywhere from 10 or 15 books at a time, and then I can, on a thumb drive. Um, what's the correct term for thumb drive?
Flash drive.
Yeah, flash drive, and download those books on there. And so I really enjoy just listening to novels of various sorts, uh, especially westerns. I really like westerns, and if I watch a movie on TV, I can only go by the sound, and then whatever my wife Bessie. I've got a really good wife who takes good care of me too, and so
Mhm.
if we watch a movie, then she'll pause it and tell me what's happening, and but I don't watch. I'd much rather listen to a book because they describe it to you,
Hmm.
as to try to watch and keep up with a movie. And so I spend most of my free time, relaxing time, listening to books, and I probably listen for um, 2 or 3 hours a day most days. So that's what I do.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, maybe I should also say I am able to go outside and walk in the neighborhood I live. Uh, I have, not every neighborhood is this way, not every house is this way, but the block that we live on has got a sidewalk all the way around it. So I learned to use a cane. I went through cane training. Um, that once again, the state blind services, uh, when this first began to happen, I was living in Texas. Texas has a really good service for blind people, and so they sent me to a school for blind people, and it wasn't one where I went to live. It was just kind of a week long deal, and I had cane training there, and so every day I try to stay active, and every day I I go around my block 8 times, and that is a little over 3 miles a day that I'm able to go outside and walk. And if I did not have my cane, I would not be able to walk. I wouldn't be able to see where I was going. But what little bit that I can see in my cane, I can find the sidewalk all the way around and almost never get lost.
That is awesome. It's funny you mentioned Westerns. That was my grandfather's big thing. He loved what was it? What was his name? Louis
Louis.
L'Amour.
Mhm.
Louis L'Amour.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was
I I've
he,
listened to every L'Amour book,
no kidding.
every one of them.
Yeah, Cory, 5 years ago, I started listening to Louis L'Amour books back in May of 2016. It's just about 6 weeks, 2 months ago that I finished all the Louis L'Amour books.
Oh,
Took
no
me,
kidding.
took me 5 years. And I don't listen prolifically like Ron does, but I do listen to books too. I have a digital player like Ron does that I have that the state of Texas provided me, and my wife does the same thing. She downloads books off of Bard onto a flash drive and gives me the books.
Oh,
Uh,
that's awesome.
One of the things that I enjoy doing, I'm I think if I had life to go back over and do again, I would change it in that I would change what career path I chose. I fell into the insurance business. I really would enjoy being in radio. I always loved radio. I started listening to radio probably when I was 5 or 6 years old. There's as a born again believer, I love Southern gospel music. A lot of people really wrinkle their nose because they say Southern gospel, that's that old country Western Christians. And no, 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 no. Uh, Southern gospel envelops uh, a wide spectrum of diversities of styles and groups and all that. From it's 180 degrees. Want some of them from the other. But I love Southern gospel music. There's a local Southern gospel station in this area, and I know it's owned by a husband and wife. It's not owned by a big corporation. It's owned by a husband and wife. And I met them when they were an internet station from like 2001 to 2009, and then they got their everything straightened out with the FCC so they could be over the air. So they've been over the air since January of 2009. It was shortly after that in February that I found them, began listening to them. I've met them at various Southern gospel concerts in this area, and we're really good friends. I listen to him every morning I participate with him by texting him. He'll bring up stuff, and I can't call him because in my phone, you have to be able to press 0
Oh,
on the phone, and I can't see to do that. So I just do it by texting. So I text him back, and I'll make comments and make I usually ask him a song request every day. And anyway, that's what I would love to do. I love radio. I love listening to books, but I love listening to Southern gospel music. And also, Cory, as you and I've discussed, I have a, you know, I grew up with the classic rock of the late 50s and the 60s and the early to mid 70s. And I've got a lot of old 33 and a third vinyl records of classic rock. I also have a whole lot of classic rock CDs, probably 80 to 90. And I probably have that many, if not more, Southern gospel CDs. I love listening to music, and that's what I do. Also, like Ron, I exercise. I don't get out and walk as much as I used to. It's just primarily laziness because I have an old-fashioned, old-style elliptical exercise machine that I exercise on, and I put in a CD or a record album, and I exercise for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon. So that's how I occupy my time.
now to get back into your classic rock, so we're gonna test your brain. There was a band in the early 60s. It was kind of a 50s doo-wop style band called Ronnie and the Redcaps. Did you ever hear of them?
I can't say that off the top of my head. I probably
They had a minor hit called an angel is missing or something like that. But the funny thing about it is, you listen to, and I point this out to fans, and you're talking about crossing genres of music and expanding your music, is the gentleman that sang for this late 50s, early 60s doo-wop band became much more well-known in the late 70s when he replaced Ozzy Osbourne in Black Sabbath. His name is Ronnie James Dio. And then he went on to a solo career singing metal.
Yeah, the metal music I never
Yeah,
enjoyed
and
that.
he also sang gospel at one time.
Yeah, the acid rock and the loud bangy heavy metal music, I never care for that.
I just think it's kind of interesting how one person can start at one place, end up at another place, and actually was successful across the board. He was a unique talent, I must say. So and we've already touched on this a little bit, but with the Bard and stuff, but what kind of adjustments have you made with CHM in your life, and various technologies that you've used? And so what do you guys do for, obviously, like I said, we've already talked about Bard, and Ron touched on his cane training, but is there any other types of technologies that you use, or any other training to help you get with your day-to-day life, or adjustments that you've had to make?
Well, I use an iPhone. Is that what you're talking about? Something like that?
Yeah.
In fact, my wife accuses me sometimes of having a love affair with Siri. She says, "You're always on your phone." She said, when you're in there talking, she's in her, she works at home in an office and over the internet. And she says, "You're in there talking in the living room. I never know if you're talking to me or if you're talking to Siri." But I use Siri, and I think Siri is a great help to the visually handicapped and blind people, because I can voice command her to do so much stuff. I can voice command her to call someone. I can voice command email. I can voice command texting and all that. It's been a big help to me.
Nice. How about you, Ron?
Well, I'm like Danny. I use Siri all the time. I do all my texting with Siri, whether she's reading it to me or whether she's sending a response. I use Siri all the time. And also, we got acquainted with a group called Computers for the Blind,
Yes.
and so both Danny and myself have received computers at at very minimal cost.
I would encourage people to look into that if they haven't.
Yeah, it's called Computers for the Blind, and it is, well, I don't know who's behind it, but someone who had too much money, I guess, and and someone who wanted to help blind people, and and then they also not only give you the computer, and they give you uh, a 1 year subscription to a program called JAWS. And I don't remember, JAWS is an acronym for something. You remember what it is, Danny?
No, he basically talks too much. No, I don't know what JAWS stands for.
I have no idea either.
All
I've
right.
It's a very good program because it allows a visually handicapped or blind person to be able to operate a computer.
Mhm.
At any rate, this Computers for the Blind will hook you up with a trainer.
Oh, wow.
And the whole 9 yards. And I mean, I got into the computer that I'm speaking to right now and recording this for somewhere around $200 for the laptop computer and the first year's JAWS program and about a year's worth of training. And it's a tremendous help.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
And so I would highly recommend people to investigate JAWS and learn how to. JAWS is a screen reader that will read the screen to you, and then you use key commands. They may be usual window commands, or they may be commands that JAWS have formulated to do all these key commands. So you can pretty much run your computer screen with JAWS telling you and helping you, and you doing the commands with your keyboard. All you need to bring is if you have the ability to touch type, then you can pretty much you can pretty much do this stuff. And through that group called Computers for the Blind at very minimal cost. So I would
That is
highly
awesome.
recommend people take advantage of that.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
It's really helpful, for instance, in sending and receiving email. You can command, if you receive an email, you can go to your email source, wherever you get it from, and the JAWS will read who the email is from, and when you press enter, it will go to that email and it will read the email to you. But also when you send email, it tells you, now this is what I do, because I enjoy doing it, but I want to make sure I do it properly, that it tells you each key that you strike, what letter it is, or what
Okay. Yep.
what key, like if I typed in Cory, it would go COREY space, then your last name, and all that. And as it types, it tells me, as I finish a word and hit space, it tells me what word I just typed. It tells me key by key, but then it tells me, after I hit space, it tells me what word I typed. So I know, and believe me, if you make a mistake, it will let you know you misspelled so-and-so, and so, but that's what I really like about it. It's very helpful because it's better as sending email as it is voice commanding text, because my church family has told me that Brother Danny, when I get a text from you, you say some really interesting things. It's stuff that I never intended to say, but Siri
like
took it that way. In
I
fact,
tell people all the time, I say, if you're doing voice to text, I said, I can tell you the iPhones come up with very inventive ways, very inventive words that they use when you try to say choroideremia.
yeah.
And
My son in Florida, I sent him a text one time and he called me and said, Dad, I don't know what you just said, but there was some profanity. and I don't use profanity, but that's how Siri, the aggravating thing is with spell check or whatever, she'll take what you're saying, and if she thinks you're saying it wrong, then she'll change it. And you never put the sh and the sh and then say it or anything like that, because it'll say the bad word.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know one time I said choroideremia in a text and it came up as chlorine, hammer, Mia.
That sounds about right.
Like, holy cow, man. What in the world? So now you both have been to, and we touched on that, you both have been to CRF conferences. What was the experience like when you went to your first one?
The very first one I went to, I think, was number 2. That was in New Orleans.
Yes, sir. Yep, I remember, because that was when I gave you the nickname that you so rightly bear to this day within the CHM community of Bum Phillips.
I wish I could see him so I could tell whether you're right or not, Cory.
We got to get him a cowboy hat.
Yeah. And boots. Don't forget the boots. The Western shirt and the blue jeans.
There you go. So go ahead, Ron. I'm sorry.
By the way, Bum Phillips actually coached high school football at Phillips High School, which is about just 2 or 3 miles outside of the town that Danny and I were both born and raised in.
Wow.
Didn't he also coach at Amarillo High School?
Yeah, and then he moved from Phillips High School to Amarillo High School.
Yeah.
And that was very early in his coaching career.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
But
isn't that funny? And when I first met you in 04, I was like, my goodness, he looks like Bum Phillips. That was my first thought.
That was late 50s, early 60s that Ron's talking about when he
because Bum was already pretty far up there when I just saw him on an interview. They were doing there's a series on the NFL Network called A Football Life, where they kind of take a certain player and they do a review of their whole career, and they interview that player and coaches and things like that. And they did what's his face, the running back, I'm talking about, the tank with legs.
Oh, Earl Campbell.
Thank you.
Yes.
Gosh, that man was
oh my goodness,
so big and people that big should not be that fast.
No kidding.
It's like, my goodness. But anyways, they were one of the people they interviewed was Bum Phillips, and I'm like, wow, he still looks really good. Anyway, so go ahead, Ron. Your impressions of your first conference. We got off track there.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed the conferences, in so much that I've never missed one since that one in New Orleans. I've been to every conference at various parts of the country, East Coast to West Coast, and I've been to every conference we've had. And I highly recommend people to come. They're very, very well done, very, very professional, tremendous amount of help. And one particular year, they had a guy, we've been talking about our iPhones and Siri. He was doing one talking about, and he said, when I get through, this is going to sound like it's an ad for iPhones, but he said iPhones are really, really geared for blind people. I mean, it is tremendous help. And I've certainly found that to be true. And I'm not, uh, that just happens to be what I have, you know. I'm not pushing for them, but, uh, and that man wasn't either. But that was at one of our conferences. I think the one that was in the Dallas area is that he was speaking at, and there's been tremendous speakers, very professionally done, um, cutting edge on the medical announcements. Uh, you get to meet Dr. Ian MacDonald, and there's just some real heroes with our group that you get to meet them and shake their hand and speak to them. And I highly recommend the conferences to go to. I'll be delighted to be at the next one, wherever it's going to be. Are you going to announce that, Cory?
It's actually going to be June. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have 2020. That got pushed back until this year, and then we had to push back again. And I'm trying to recall the exact dates, but I believe it is June 16th to the 18th of next year in Rochester, New York.
All right.
So, which we can, I'm just thinking of the irony of let's have a group of blind guys go to the photography museum that's there. Just to have some fun. So now, Danny, now you haven't been to as many no, you went. I'm trying to remember. Your first one was Philly, wasn't it?
No, Chicago, 2006.
Oh, okay, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, my wife is from Southern Indiana, and had a sister-in-law that well, she still lives in that area, but she lives in a different place now. But we drove to stay with family in Southern Indiana. Then when we met Ron somewhere, and was at the airport. No, we met him at the hotel in Chicago. Anyway, I roomed with him, and my wife roomed with her sister in the hotel there. And that was the first one that I went to. And both of the conferences, I echo what Ron said about the medical briefings that we get on the state of choroideremia and the research and all that is really eye-opening to me, particularly the first time that I heard it.
Eye-opening for a blind guy?
Yeah, eye-opening for a blind guy. Yeah. You know, I don't think they did the technology thing at that one, but the only other one I went to was 2018 in Dallas that I referred to earlier, and they did the technology. I had an iPhone and had one for 2 or 3 years at the time. I didn't know there was such a thing as voiceover. And so I began utilizing voice. I still am not proficient in my use of voiceover, but I didn't know there was such a thing. But one of the things that really helped me, you know, I'm a man in Beaumont, Texas, a city of approximately 120,000 people. And based on what I've heard about the genetics of choroideremia, I'm likely, my ophthalmologist says, as far as he knows, I'm the only person in Beaumont, Texas that has choroideremia. So it makes you feel lonely when you think that you're the only person. But then when you get to one of these conferences and you realize, hey, I'm not the only person that has this. It affects a lot of people. And there's a lot of things being done to combat this and try to stabilize people's vision that have it, and research, hopefully someday, for cure of it. One of the things I really thought was comical when we went to Dallas, Melissa's husband, he was real nice. I think he escorted me and Ron to the men's room many times. And he would stand there in the men's room, not only direct me and Ron to where we needed to go, but other men that had choroideremia that couldn't find the urinal or find the toilet, but he would come in, what do you need? And he would direct them wherever they needed. He was the gatekeeper and the director and all that. It was just really funny because everybody there needed help. I thought, I'm not the only one that has problems trying to find a urinal or a toilet in a men's room. And my wife doesn't like it when I have to go into a men's room all by myself. So we try to find, when we travel, we try to find the family or the changing restrooms or the family restroom, so we can share the same restroom, so she doesn't have to worry about me getting lost in there. Or it's really amazing every time that I go into a men's room by myself, there's somebody in there, and I always pray before I go in there, Lord, would you bless me with somebody in this men's room that can help me find what I need? And it never fails. There's always somebody there, and they'll either notice I'm blind because I have my cane, or they'll say, can I help you? And I tell them what I need. And I say, would you mind waiting until I'm done? Then you can help me out. And they always do. So, but that was one of the things I noticed that was really funny, but it's really helpful to know that I'm not the only person that has choroideremia. I mean, I knew Ron did, but Ron lives in Kansas. I live in Texas. So, but
That's like different worlds. Yeah, I've always shaken my head at the fact I do quite a bit of traveling, and it's like, it would make it so much easier on low vision and blind people if the layout of the men's rooms at the airports was consistent.
Yes.
Because no two are the same.
Yeah. Well, that's one place where when we travel, we we used to drive about everywhere we wanted to go on vacation, but we live in Southeast Texas. I have a son that lives about an hour north of Tampa, Florida. So we found out that it's cheaper to fly to Tampa than it is to drive to Tampa. And we can get on a nonstop flight and be there in 2 hours instead of having 18 hours of driving to get there over 2 days. So, but these airports do have those family restrooms where all she does is we both know before we get on the plane, when we're getting ready to start waiting, we need to visit the restroom. So she finds one and we go in there. And so that's what we use. So airports are real good about that.
Yeah. So
one thing else I've noticed about airports, when you have to go through security, or even if you're at the airport and you're checking luggage and all that, when I had my cane out, people fall all over themselves to help us.
Yeah.
To help somebody they know is blind or visually impaired. Most people that see the cane, they assume that you're blind. And it worked that way through security. Many times I go to the airport to go through security, we get herded to the front of the line because of the fact that they see that I'm someone with a blind cane. I know I've heard that there's a lot of men with choroideremia that have a hard time making the break to use the cane because it's an affront to your dignity as a man. And I understand that. But let me tell you, it makes so much difference to how you are viewed. Before I used to use my cane, I used to run into people, or even my wife would direct me. I'd be hanging onto her right arm and with her elbow, and people still bump into me and they think that I was stupid or something. But then I started using the cane. They stop and they say, "Oh, please go ahead." They're using the cane maybe an affront to your dignity. And it was for me, but I got over that because I see how it helps me, and primarily it helps my wife. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's the other part of it. Yeah, the first time I ever used a cane, I used a borrowed cane, believe it or not, and I gave it the acid test. I took it to the Olympics in 1996, and let me tell you, I would not have had the quote unquote Olympic experience that I had if it hadn't been for that cane. And the day after I got home, I called up the Mass Commission for the Blind and signed up for mobility training right away. It was an epiphany like you wouldn't believe.
I haven't had the extensive mobility training that Ronnie has, but I have years ago when I first contacted Rehabilitative Services here in Texas. They assigned me to some training, the mobility training here, and also gave me my first collapsible cane. And we met the trainer out at the local mall here. And, there's a lot of people there and a lot of different stores and all that. And she taught us taught my wife how to lead me around, taught me how to use stairs with the cane and all that. So, you need mobility training, whether it's extensive or just minor like I've had.
Yeah. So now, and now both of you touched on it a bit, but I want to go back to Ron for a minute. Now, how do you feel about the research that's going on currently with choroideremia?
Well, I'm just glad they're doing some. I think people are a little discouraged with some of the recent news, um, but I'm not. I'm glad that it's still going on. I actually have of course, my daughter is a carrier. Her name's Melissa. She's been mentioned here today, and she has a son who is, I believe he's 17 years old now, and he is also a CHMer. And so anything I do, uh, like I volunteered for, uh, for testing from Night Star and uh, anything I was doing, I wasn't doing to help me. I was doing to help him and other youngsters like him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
all about the next generation.
yes, absolutely.
And
I,
Danny,
I was just going to say, I have two sons. And when my doctor, my ophthalmologist told me, he said, Danny, you have choroideremia. And he said, that's a real blessing because he said the genetics of choroideremia are black and white. He said, he knew I have two sons, no daughters. He said, it stops with you and your side of the family, Danny, because he said, your sons cannot get choroideremia. And
mhm,
so that was a real blessing to me. I'm glad that they're doing the research for Melissa's son and for other people. The research and everything is not going to help anyone like me, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview because you know I am and Ron is beyond the help of the research that they're doing right now. But I wanted to let people know that there is still life with choroideremia. But I'm glad that they're doing it. I believe someday, not in my lifetime probably, but there will be a cure for choroideremia.
yeah, I fully agree with you too. Whether or not, I mean, I know there is research going on right now on replacement therapies to replace what we've lost. But as we all know, research takes a long time, and it takes quite a bit of money. And so whether or not that happens in our lifetimes, who knows? But it is nice to know that it is coming. It's not one of these things that's science fiction anymore. It is now something that is actively being worked on. And
And
that
I know people watching this interview not going to believe this, but I'm only 4 years younger than Ron. I just turned 70 back in May. So that's why I say I know it's likely that there will be no research that will help me, but if it will help future generations like Melissa's son, that's the most important thing.
exactly. I fully agree with that. I mean, I have, my family's pretty large. Um, my family's pretty large, and I have, cousins and many cousins, many cousins from the CHM side of the family. And just knowing, there are cousins that are, in their 20s and 30s that are having children. And and these, I've seen 5 generations in my family be affected by choroideremia at this point.
It's interesting.
I wanted to be the last.
In our family, there was only one person in our family. It came from my mom's side. My mom was the carrier, obviously,
Mhm.
and Ron, but she had a brother. All we knew at the time, they didn't know what it was. We knew that he had problems with his vision. And, now we would know that he had choroideremia, but
Mhm.
he had no sons. My mom had a sister that had 3 sons, and none of them got the disease.
Wow.
And the other brother had no children. So Ron and I, other than that uncle that didn't have any children of his own, Ron and I are the only ones in our family that were affected by choroideremia.
Wow.
And
Yeah, I traced it back to 1860 in my family with the birth of my great grandmother.
Hmm.
She was a carrier.
Hmm.
So, and what does, obviously the CRF has been around since, 2000, and, you've been with the CRF almost as long. What does the CRF mean to you, and how has it impacted your life?
Well, I feel like I'm part of a family, and Danny's already mentioned this to an extent, and so I feel like I'm part of a family, um, and I feel very close to um, people like you, Cory, and in fact, we call each other brother,
Exactly.
even though we're not, physically brothers, but we are CHM brothers. And so I feel like that our CRF foundation is a great place. I mean, I think every conference we've had, there's been brand new people that have come and have been totally amazed um, to see and know all of this. I'm thinking of several right now that I've gotten to know and gotten to be friends with, uh, who felt that same way. And I imagine, Cory, you could make a big list of uh, people who've come to our conference. I remember the day whenever I did a search on a computer for choroideremia, and there the CRF came up, and that was my connection, just doing a search for choroideremia, and the foundation came up, and I learned about uh, the conference that was coming up in New Orleans, and I made plans and arrangements to go, and I've been an active part ever since. And what a family it is.
Yeah, I agree. How about you, Danny?
Yeah, I would echo what Ron said, primarily from the standpoint of what I mentioned about the two conferences that I've been. It's a blessing to know that choroideremia is a very rare minor disease. If I remember correctly, Dr. MacDonald, the first time I went to it, mentioned that it affects 1 in 50,000 Anglo-Saxon men, which makes it an extremely rare disease. And people ask me, well, what caused your blindness? Did you have an accident? And I say, that's a genetic disease. And I tell them it affects 1 in 50,000 Anglo-Saxon men. They go, wow, that's very rare. And I go, yeah, it really is. But the fact, that's what really amazed me, was that in 2006, when I went there, that it had those numbers about the genetics, and yet there was research being done uh, uh, trying to affect stabilization and a cure for an extremely rare disease. That's what really floored me. So that makes me feel really good that that's going on, and that so many people there are involved in effecting changes for people that have choroideremia.
Yeah, it just goes to show what a small group of patients that are as stubborn as bulls can accomplish. Their minds to it. Yeah, Ron, you commented on the new people that come to conferences, and I've gotten into a habit over the years of telling, I speak to a lot of CHMers, and many people I speak to before they come to their first conference. And many times, like you guys, where you've never really known anybody else or met anybody else with choroideremia. And I sometimes get on the phone with people, and they're pretty nervous about it, especially when they've never known anybody with CHM and they're coming to their first conference, and they're a little intimidated by that thought. And I tell them the same thing, which is, you're coming to a family reunion. You just haven't met the family members yet.
Yeah.
and that is what is always, the science is great. The tech updates, the research updates, they're phenomenal. But the one thing, and I've been to many conferences, I've been to American Council for the Blind and National Federation for the Blind conventions. I've been to many others. And the thing that always affects me about the CRF is that, the family atmosphere. I think what makes it unique and special.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
So we're gonna wrap this up here, but any last thoughts you would like to share, Ron, as the better looking older brother? We'll let you go.
Well, I just thank the good Lord for keeping me alive and giving me something to do. I live in a quiet little town and get to live the quiet life here, and that's exactly what I want. And I I enjoy waking up every day, starting my day, and whatever I wind up doing, I don't necessarily do the same things, exactly every day, but pretty much have my routines that I go through, and I really enjoy living. And I would never think about ending my life because I've got choroideremia.
Yeah. How about you, Danny?
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I didn't mention is that when I went on disability, my wife had to go out into the workforce and I had to stay home, but we just traded jobs. I'm pretty much the homemaker and she works, although she's blessed to be able to work at home. That's why I wanted to tell people that we have a deal in the kitchen. She messes the kitchen up and I clean it up. I do the laundry. She lets me do the vacuuming because she says even you're doing it, even kind of hit and miss is better than her having to do it all. So, those are the things that I do. But I like Ron. The thing that I'm really blessed with is to have a heavenly Father that loves me because He gave His Son Jesus to die on the cross for me, so I could have eternal life. And He gave me my wife nearly 50 years ago, and gave me the woman. We don't have time to go into it. It's a boring story anyway, but it's interesting how my wife and I met. But He went out of His way to let me, a boy from the Texas Panhandle find a girl from the Southern Indiana and meet because of college, not the same college, but because of college. And He gave me her, and she is everything I could have ever hoped for in a wife. And we eat extremely healthy. We're blessed with good health. We eat organically. We began this transition, 20 some odd years ago. And we see people that don't take care of themselves and don't eat right. And they begin having medical problems, and we're blessed with good health. So I just want to give thanks to God and glory to Him for what He's done for me and also through my wife and my church.
Amen.
Gentlemen, this has been so much fun. This has been a great, and Danny, thank you for, Danny emailed me, full disclosure. I kind of had it in the back of my head at some point, maybe interview a couple of siblings at the same time. And then, it was kind of like on the back burner. And then Danny emailed me one day with this idea of interviewing him and Ron. And I said, oh my gosh, this will be epic. And it has been. So I'd like to thank you both so much for coming and agreeing to do this.
Well, thank you, Cory.
All right. And thank you all for those who have been watching. And we will see you on the next episode of Meet a CHM Family Member. Thank you again for watching.
Thank you, Cory.
Thank you, Cory.